but I'm afraid you'll just have to wait.
I hate waiting.
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I devote my time to ranting and raving about board games and usually mostly the ranting part. This is Vale of Eternity, the expansion Artifact. So I've already done a review for this game, by all means go check it out. And I gave it a pretty solid rating because as a light engine builder goes, this is one of the best examples I've seen for a while. Theme, whatever. Theme schmeem. It means nothing. It's basically a card game where you summon monsters with cool abilities and you try to find a broken combo. Compared to something else like Res Arcana, for example, which kind of tries to do a similar thing with like a non-established theme and it's really quick and does engine building. That one I find a bit boring. This one I found really good fun, with one or two caveats. So now they've brought out a new expansion, Artifacts. It's pretty small. In fact, the box is probably somewhere down there. I'll grab it for the next shot. But, you know, we're not talking a very big expansion here. So that makes me feel a little bit better because it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to overcomplicate this game too much. It's nice, it's light, and it's quick. I don't want you to destroy that. So hopefully it's just going to add more variety and nothing too complex. We'll see.
Ooh, short answer yes with an if, long answer no with a but.
So there's the box for you. Nice and small, nice and easy. You won't need it once you've opened it though, because it all fits in the main box anyway. So this one still caters for 2 to 4 players. There's no solo mode officially in this box, but with a small rulebook, it mainly just adds 2 things to the game. Firstly, more cards. You'll notice this deck is a bit fatter than it once was before, because there's a decent chunk of cards that have been added to the deck, and you can throw these in regardless of whether you use the other part of this expansion. You know, nothing in any of these cards talks about any mechanics that you find on the artifacts. So you can literally just go boom, shuffle them in, and then you've got more variety from the 5 different family suits.
Shut up and take my money!
This is already a good way to get my money, frankly. When you make a card game that is all based on lots of unique stuff, just throwing a small box with a bunch of stuff for variety is always a good way to just improve the game without making it any more complex, although you could just package it in a nice plastic wrapping without needing a whole box for it. So why do we need a box? Well, you need now these elements. So essentially, you have artifacts, which is not a huge amount of them to be said, a few reference cards, a new standee, which is ultimately pointless. It just reminds you that now we play to 80 points rather than 60. More on the effect of that a little bit later. And you now have a square tile that you put down as well as a little stick tile. You know, so nothing exactly too much in the component front. But what are these artifacts? Essentially, these artifacts, several of them are laid out before the game starts. Some of them based on player count, and 1 or 2, you know, will probably be randomized. But as I say, there's not a huge amount of them. And some of them are fixed on player count, so there's not a huge amount of replay value on them, but you don't want too many of these, I guess. But the idea is that these will be laid out before the game starts, so let's just say we got these 3 for a kickoff, the Gem of Kokukan, the Ring of Wishes, and the Cap of Hades. Each one has some cool special effect, and it may just be an effect similar to what's on the cards, but now you have effects where you can use them once in a round, or, you know, or ones that allow you to recover cards, which are linked to this little stick thing that you have. Not only do you have areas on your board where you play and summon your cards, but some effects will allow you to just take cards from the display or from the deck and put them into what is essentially your shelter. And whilst it's in your shelter, other effects can't do anything with it. You're essentially keeping it in long-term storage until you need it, but you have to go through a recover mechanic in order to actually get it back into your hands so you can then use it. It's not a bad little thing, although having this on the table along with, you know, 10 of your cards or something does get a little bit fiddly in terms of table space and trying not to get your cards mixed up, because if you have more stuff in your shelter, then you're going to have to separate them out, and all you've got is this tiny little stick to basically differentiate them. I think they could have maybe done something a little bit better with it, or maybe just done without the whole shelter mechanic entirely, because it kind of feels a little bit like extra in terms of what's already on these mechanics. Some of these effects allow you to get new areas, so these +1 and +2 tokens, basically, normally you're only allowed to have, and I hate this terminology, area, I think it's so dumb that that was used, but basically, how many cards can you have in front of you? Well, normally you are limited to the number on the current round. Well, if you're able to purchase these with the use of artifacts, then you can have another 1 or 2 extra cards in front of you on top of the round number. These are always nice to have. More cards in front of you can be good for certain strategies, although some strategies don't care about cards, but I can take or leave it. It's an easy thing, it's just part of 1 or 2 of the artifacts. So the reference cards, these are nice. I mean, it's good to actually have a reference card with bullet points to say this is what you do in each particular phase, although it would have been nice to have had these in the base game before we had all these effects, because unfortunately these reference cards have all the artifact stuff on there. So if you're playing this game and not using the artifacts, then part of your reference card isn't relevant. Would have been nice if maybe they, you know, if you didn't have it in the base game, they could have just printed out artifact and non-artifact versions of these, you know, just so that you could mix and match. But you know, having to tell players, right, there's your reference card in front of you, and anything that's got a plus symbol or any word artifact, you can ignore. That's always fiddly with reference cards, and it's just a little bit of a pain.
It's stupid! It's stupid!
Well, you know, you're probably thinking, well, why don't you use artifacts all the time? What's the big deal? Well, good and bad, because the good part is that I do like all these cool effects that they do. I mean, they do vary a lot in what they have on them. So, retrieve a card and or discard a card from your shelter to earn money, okay? Upgrade 2 of your stones. Discard one of your summoned cards. If it's a dragon, earn money. Reveal another card, shelter a card from the display. That was that whole shelter thing underneath the stick. Earn 2 ones, shelter the top card, draw a card or retrieve all cards, purchase areas, discard 2 cards to earn a bunch of money. You know, this activate the end of round effect of something in your area. There's a lot of cool effects that these do, and they allow you to just basically create even more combos and weird stuff in order to try and win the game. So it's a bit like adding more cards to the deck, except now everybody's got use of these. The way these work is that basically when the round starts, you'll have so many of them out, and in the similar turn order structure to choosing the cards, you have the square token to place on an artifact to say, this is what I'm going to use for the round. And every round you've got to move to a different artifact. You can't all use the same artifact, so if somebody else takes an artifact, you're screwed, you know, you have to go to some different artifact, but you also can't spam the same artifact round after round after round after round. So it means that you do have to diversify and tactically think in the moment, which artifact do I really need? These are cool, but there's a knock-on effect. This thing, saying that you get to play to 80 points. These artifacts and the new cards, yes, they allow you to create more combos and do a little bit more, but I don't think an extra 20 points is quite enough to, you know, to like say, oh yeah, this is perfectly balanced out. One problem Vale of Eternity has is when you go to the max number of players, the time length gets too long for what this game should be, which is, to be fair, something that Res Arcana I think does have an advantage over, because it is a little bit shorter. It's just more boring.
Your mother.
But the problem with this is that 2 to 4 players, this game was always best played at 2. As a 2-player head-to-head game, super snappy, super quick. There's not a lot of player interaction at all. You know, the cards that you put out on this display scale with players, so that's easy enough. So playing this with 2 players is kind of the way to go. There's no real reason to play this with 3 or 4. But if I must, I'll play it with 3 or 4 because I enjoy the mechanics of the game and I want to show it off to people. But the time length does get longer when you do 3 to 4 players. 3 is alright, you know, 3 is about as much as I want. 4 players, I'm like, we got any AP players here? Or people that aren't good with card games? I'm not so sure I want to play this game, and so I'll be a little bit hesitant. This one adds to the time length. The base game box says 40 minutes on the box, right? This says 50. I guarantee you, this does not just add 10 minutes to the game by any stretch of margin. Because you've got this whole extra phase of choosing the artifacts, which require you to think about your choices, and you're doing more effects from them, you know, the rounds do take longer. So it's not just adding 10 minutes to the game, maybe 10 minutes if you're in a 2-player, but if you thought you were going to get a 4-player done in Vale of Eternity done in an hour, you're wishful thinking. If you think you're going to get a 4-player done of this game in 90 minutes, you're wishful thinking. In fact, I swear there was one 4-player game that took nearly 2 hours to finish because people were just taking ages to deal with artifacts. Now, granted, that's an extreme example with some pretty AP players, but it can drag out that long with artifacts because if you're not the sort of person who's comfortable with just looking at a hand of cards, seeing a bunch of cool abilities and doing something based on them, like, you know, if you play Magic, for example, you'll get used to this game fine. I'm pretty good at those sort of games where you've got cards with different abilities and you just got to pick the best one to use for a particular scenario. So I gravitate to this stuff quite quick. Some people don't, and if they don't gravitate to this kind of thing, then I'd probably recommend they don't play this game because it's just going to drag things out, particularly with the artifacts. And so the problem with this expansion is that The artifacts are great to use in 2-player. Love it in 2 players. 3 I will use if I trust the people I'm playing with or we've played before. I will never use artifacts with 4 players ever again. 4 players, just throw the cards together and that's it. Don't bother with artifacts. The game will just drag out too long. There's too much going on and it outsteps its welcome for what was meant to be a speedy, light engine builder. If you're going to make this take as long as a midweight Euro, then it's lost its whole point, its whole appeal, even if the mechanics are fun. So that's my little issue there. So not much else to say. That is literally all the expansion is. More cards and these artifacts. The artifacts are great, but they do extend the time length for the game. The cards, throw them in, you won't even know they're there, and that's fine. You can separate them if you really want. They've got an expansion symbol, but why would you bother? So the expansion is fine. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10 overall. I like more variety, that's all cool. The artifact powers are pretty sweet, but again, it's really only a case that I want to play this with 2 or 3, and if I'm going to throw in artifacts, I'm probably only going to want to play it with 2 all the time. Like for a 2-player, I might throw in this artifacts all the time. With 3, maybe if everyone's played the game before, I'll throw it in with 3. With 4, never. Never throwing it in with 4 players, and that's the issue. It takes the time length to a situation where I'm not that happy. In fact, I might even house rule the fact that if you're playing with 4 players and artifacts, you don't do this 80-point thing. Because I'm like, why do I need to extend the game to 80 points? If I can make the game nice and speedy, then why not make it nice and speedy? It's not like you're going to finish in round 4 or 5. It's next to impossible. You're still probably going to finish in somewhere like the 8th, 9th, or 10th round, but 80 points just seems a bit much. I don't know, seems a little bit much. So 7 out of 10, it's a good expansion, worth grabbing if you're a mega fan and playing with the same people all the time. But if this is a casual thing, you're just playing every now and again with brand new players all the time, you might want to be a bit wary. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out the actual review for Vale of Eternity I've done to see my pros and cons about the game. So until next time, regardless of whether you want to go to 80 points or not, it's still only a game, so bye for now.